Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining NCW Libraries this evening for Becoming a Conscious Consumer. My name is Amanda, and I am the Adult Services Manager with NCW Libraries. Thank you for being here. Before we dive in, I wanted to share how this Zoom event will work. At the end of the presentation, Jana will open it up for questions, and we'd love for you to submit your questions through the Q&A feature on the bottom of your screen. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce Jana Fischback, the Executive Director of Sustainable Wenatchee. Sustainable Wenatchee is a nonprofit that promotes a culture of environmental stewardship and social sustainability in the Wenatchee Valley. Jana is a Wenatchee native and earned her master's in environmental studies from Evergreen State College. She worked as a sustainability coordinator on the West Side before returning to the Valley in 2016. She co-founded Sustainable Wenatchee a year later. She is passionate about showing how social justice and economic sustainability are both intricately tied to environmental issues. So Jana, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. Hi, everyone. This is Becoming a Conscious Consumer, the high cost of cheap stuff and how to be a better buyer. As Amanda said, I'm Jana Fischback. I'm the Executive Director with Sustainable Wenatchee. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. And I like to start these kind of talks with a quick disclaimer that I am not perfect, so please do not think I'm on some high horse. I am, like everyone else, on a road to becoming a more conscious consumer and more environmentally conscious, and so I'll be offering lots of advice, but please don't think that I am taking all of it myself. I myself am on the journey as well. Some things that kind of overlap with this topic that I won't have time to talk about tonight are looking at the end life of products. And so that is things like zero waste and recycling or food waste and composting. Those are obviously very, there's a lot of overlap with the things you buy and then what ends up happening to those things, but I won't have time to talk about those tonight. And so hopefully we'll be doing another zero waste talk soon. I did one about a year ago, and so we'll probably be planning on doing that again soon. And then I also think we need to have a food waste and composting class pretty soon, because that seems to be a really a topic that a lot of people are interested in. So hopefully that will come up soon as well. All right, so we will get started. I tried to pick happy, bright colors for tonight's presentation since it's such a cold winter's night. So the first question is, what is a conscious consumer? That's someone who essentially understands that what we buy has a really big effect, not just on our personal health, but on the environment, on society as a whole, and our economy. A conscious consumer considers this impact and actively works to be a more responsible citizen. And I assume, since you're here tonight watching this, that you are probably working towards that. One thing I'd like to say here is that it's not all about what you do. At Sustainable Wenatchee, we really work toward encouraging people to make behavior changes voluntarily. We're not so much focused on the politics or passing bills or anything like that. But there is something to be said of your voting with your dollar can only go so far. And so I will mention later on in the presentation, talking a little bit about that and manufacturer's responsibility here. So tonight we'll be talking about what the problem is with buying so much stuff. I assume if you're at this presentation, you probably already know that there's a big problem with the way we consume as Americans. Of course, we'll go over some solutions, and I'm gonna kind of focus in on three areas: groceries, clothes, and household items. Originally, I had listed electronics in the description for this presentation as well, but in the consideration of time, I'm going to skip that, that topic and just say that when you're buying electronics, obviously getting the most life out of your devices that you can is best, not upgrading every year just to get new features. And if you can, buy a refurbished one is a good option. But other than that, I'm going to leave electronics for a different time. So our problem is a pretty simple one. The stuff we buy is made cheaply, and that's at the expense of our natural resources and of other people. When we talk about natural resources, we're talking about the carbon emissions created from using fossil fuels, wasting resources like water and land, pollution and the toxic chemicals that are used, land changes and deforestation. And then when we're talking about people, it's people who are earning much less than a living wage, not even minimum wage, but way under what is even reasonable for them to live, working in harsh and unsafe working conditions, suffering from sexual harassment at work, exposure to toxic chemicals, and issues with slave labor and child labor. And so, as you know, the things that we buy, we don't think about it when we're at the store or we're online, but there is quite a problem with the things we accumulate. So I'm going to briefly go over some of the problems. I'm going to try to be quick because I know this part is depressing, and I know that you probably know a decent amount already about the problems we're facing, and then we'll get to the good part with the solutions. So this is just a quick picture of the impacts of food. And on the left here, you'll see greenhouse gases. So food accounts for about 1/4 of our global emissions. Next is land use. About half of the habitable land that we use is used for agriculture. About 70% of the water that we use is used for agriculture. And in that gray area, you see industry is 19%. So you can assume a good portion of that is also textiles, which we'll be talking about. For eutrophication, that's essentially polluting water from runoff from agriculture. So the fertilizers and pesticides run off from the fields into the streams and rivers and then go to the ocean. About 80% of that is due to agriculture. And then livestock, this is kind of interesting that the vast majority of the mammals, the biomass on Earth are livestock at 94%. So that just gives a quick glimpse at some of the environmental impacts that our food has. Next, we're going to look at some fashion impacts. And so fashion also has a high carbon footprint. That's especially true now because a lot of the clothes we wear are made from polyester. I've been shocked in doing this research, just kind of noticing my own labels and how many things are made from polyester that you wouldn't have thought of. I think of something that's soft and nice and look at the label and yep, it's mostly polyester. And that's oil. We're essentially wearing plastic. And so obviously there's the issue of extracting those fossil fuels and using them for clothing, but also the synthetic fibers that are then getting into our water and into our drinking water and to our food if you eat fish. Next, for fashion, a big impact is water use. And this is really staggering to understand, but it's partly from growing cotton, which is a really water intensive crop, but also from things like how jeans have to be washed to kind of get that worn look. And so a pair of jeans can use up to, I think it's 5.5 years worth of drinking water in one pair of jeans. So that just goes to show how important it is when we make the decision to buy a pair of jeans, the impact that it can have. And then finally, looking at the pollution and the chemicals that are used in fashion, that there's a lot that goes into making textiles, and that it's a big polluter of oil, even though you wouldn't think of it. The apparel industry causes quite a bit of pollution. And then, of course, the amount that ends up in our landfill, with 10.5 million tons going every year into our landfill of clothing. This looks at some of the social impacts. So when we talk about, we're not talking just about the environmental impacts, but the people that make our clothing. This is Rana Plaza, which collapsed in April 2013. I'm sure many of you remember this. And it kind of seems to take a terrible event like this. This was in Bangladesh, where it gets our attention as Americans, because people are living in terrible conditions, working in terrible conditions every day, but it's not till we see something like this where they had drawn attention to cracks in the walls in the building and tried to get management and the owners of the building to realize that this building was in such disrepair. And unfortunately, over 1,000 people died in this tragic incident. And so after that, companies like H&M committed to be better about paying a living wage, and it's been 7 or 8 years now, and it still hasn't really come to fruition with the working conditions getting that much better over the years. Some changes have been made, but a lot of the companies have not kept up to their word to improve it. This says only 4% of the price of a garment goes to the actual women who make them. It's primarily women who make our garments all over the world. But if brands did absorb the cost to pay these workers a true living wage, which would pay for their housing and their food and schooling for their children and a comfortable life, it would only increase the product cost from 1% to 4%. So something that I think as most Americans, we'd be very willing to pay, but for some reason it's not getting to the companies to make that change. And then finally, looking at just general emissions from the things that we buy. Here on the left, you can see This is kind of an average American's carbon footprint. In Washington, it's a little bit different for us. That purple and the gray, home heating and cooling and other energy use would be much smaller because we have the wonderful benefit of hydropower that's clean and carbon free. And so that means that food, transportation, and stuff we buy makes up a bigger portion of the pie since we don't have the carbon footprint from energy, which is great. If you drive an electric car, your transportation piece is even smaller. And so it shows you that the places where we can really make a difference apart from transportation in Washington are the food we eat and the things we buy. Then on the right here is another pie chart kind of illustrating what we buy and where the carbon footprint comes from. And what I gather from this is that there's not a clear villain here. You know, there's healthcare and construction, miscellaneous obviously isn't very helpful. And so reducing what we buy is helpful, but there's not something that really stands out. There's clothing at 5%, so we'll be talking about that, but in general, just household goods and things like that, it's obviously good to reduce to shrink your carbon footprint, but there's not one that really stands out there. All right, so hopefully that gave you a little bit of a glimpse into some of the problems we're facing, both social and environmental problems. And so now we'll talk about solutions. And I'm gonna offer the suggestion that we buy less and we buy more smart, make more smart decisions. So I know a lot of you are probably here because you want to learn tips and tricks so that you can make better decisions when it comes to buying something and you're ready to make a purchase. But I would be really remiss to have this conversation without really pushing to buy less in the first place. And if I leave you with anything, it's not, oh, I want to go shop from that one brand that now I know is really eco-friendly and responsible, or I want to look at this to purchase. It's the takeaway is, do I really need to buy it in the first place? And I'm preaching to myself here because I need to learn this as well. Josh Becker said the most environmentally friendly product is the one you didn't buy. And it's so true. So here I have the hierarchy of needs, and it lists all the other ideal things to do before you decide to make that purchase. And then buy is at the top there. And I would suggest changing that to buy local if you can. That's the best option. So some suggestions on buying less is first kind of identify your triggers. And that's going to really depend on what kind of shopper you are. So if you're an online shopper, that's what I kind of tend to do. Trying to reduce any triggers, maybe it's deleting apps from your phone. So I no longer have the Amazon app or any shopping apps on my phone. If I'm going to make a purchase, I'm going to log onto my computer and be more mindful of that. It makes it a little bit more difficult when something pops into your mind, oh, I need this. You know, you can't just hop on your phone and order it. Reducing your screen time in general, I think, is good, because a lot of time social media kind of gets at us where maybe it's from other friends, or often it's advertising from companies where things pop up on your feed of ideas to buy different products that you didn't know existed, that you didn't know you needed, but all of a sudden Instagram's making it look really good. That has happened to me just in doing research for this, trying to find responsible brands and eco-friendly brands. I started to like some of them on Instagram, and now I'm being bombarded with all these new great brands, and they are selling good things, and they're being responsible in their sourcing and manufacturing, but it's stuff that I don't need. And so just kind of staying off social media, I think, is a helpful thing for our mental health and for our shopping habits. There are apps and website blockers that you can install if you really need to keep yourself off these websites. But I think just trying to reduce our time is a good suggestion. If you're more of a in-person shopper, some of your triggers might be going to the mall. I don't know if people do that anymore, but don't do that. Or maybe it's just going to Target and sticking to your list, not going unless you really need to, because you know that you'll end up with things that you don't need on that Target trip. So those are some ways to kind of identify things that might trigger you to make purchases that you don't need to. If you're an impulse shopper, maybe imposing some limits where you are going to have to think about it for 2 days before you place that order, you go to the store and look. Maybe you kind of make it fun where you say, for January, I'm only going to buy organic, or I'm only going to buy used clothing, or one article of clothing per month for the year, kind of setting some limits so that you can keep it under control. And then one thing I think is interesting is to be aware of the Diderot effect. And this is a man who lived back in the day, and he wrote encyclopedias, and he didn't have a lot of wealth, but some queen bought his library, and all of a sudden he had all this money. And so he bought himself a nice new red robe. And all of a sudden, everything else he had didn't compare to this beautiful new red robe. And so he had to buy a new rug and buy, you know, all these new things. And it's kind of this idea of one purchase begets another. If you buy one nice thing, then, you know, you get a new couch, but it doesn't match. Now you need curtains and a rug and pillows, and this kind of dominoes effect. So just being aware of that, if you do purchase a new thing, to not let that kind of overtake your purchasing habits. And then finally, I just want to leave you with the question on this page of what could you buy less of, thinking about your life and what makes most sense for you, and could you commit to maybe throughout this year buying less of a certain item, or like I said, imposing some sort of limit where you're going to try to make a game out of it maybe, and really holding yourself accountable for buying less this year. And then next is buying smarter, or buying responsibly. And when I say responsibly, it can mean two things and maybe three. The first is, of course, environmentally, sustainably, eco-friendly, all those terms for being mindful of the ecological effects of what you buy. Those topics could include microplastics, food waste, resource use in making textiles. Those are all things to consider when you're talking about responsibility environmentally. And then ethically it can include both people and animals. Most of the time in this term, we're talking about people. And those are like the garment workers in Bangladesh, all over the world. Our clothes are made in countries all over the world. And agricultural workers, both here and globally. And then thinking about the ethical treatment of animals, if you're buying animal products, and were they raised humanely and slaughtered humanely as well. And then the third one that I'm not going to speak too much to tonight, but I think really overlaps with a lot of this, is personal health. Because what is unhealthy for you as a person likely is probably unhealthy for the person that made it in a factory. And because it's now in the environment, it's bad for the ecosystem that you live in. And so that could be things like toxins and plastics like BPA, fragrance like phthalates and parabens, things in cosmetics and household items. So looking at more at your personal health, purchasing responsibly can then kind of fan out into the other areas of ethics and environment as well. And in terms of buying smarter, being a responsible purchaser, you have to be aware of greenwashing. And so that is when a company advertises something as eco-friendly when it isn't, or just more eco-friendly when it's not that eco-friendly. And this can be as simple as just being a little bit deceptive, making a logo, a green logo, like BP Oil's logo is green, making you think that progress is being made when it probably isn't. Some of these examples I have here are Huggies diapers. These are pure and natural. It even says they're made with some organic cotton, but we all know that disposable diapers are a major problem for waste and, in the landfill, and it's really not a green product. This boxed water, I wanted to share a video today, but in the essence of time, we won't, but it's just hilarious. It's ridiculous how they're trying to market this boxed water as an eco-friendly item. It's kind of, I think, bottled water for hipsters or something, because it's this paper container that is not plastic, true, and it's not aluminum, but in our area, these kind of cartons aren't even recyclable. So you're still having a disposable product that is going to end up in the landfill. But if you're interested, I'd say go to boxedwaterisbetter.com and watch their videos, because it's laughable. And then speaking of water, there's this water bottle here that advertises their smaller cap, so there's less plastic. It's got 20% less plastic in this. And so you can be green, which, is kind of a ridiculous claim for a water bottle company. So those are some things to watch out for. There's no, I think, fail-proof way to identify when somebody is greenwashing. I think a lot of products probably do try to make their companies try to make their products look a little more eco-friendly and sustainable than they are. If you're curious, if it makes a lot of claims like pure and natural but has nothing to back it up, that's a pretty good indicator. If you go to their website and they're really vague, you can have an idea that they're probably, if they don't have good statistics or things to back up their claims, that it's just greenwashing. And then in talking about buying responsibly, I'll talk quickly about shopping online, because I know this is a popular question of which is worse, buying in stores, buying online at a brick and mortar store, or buying online. And in my research, I've actually found it to be kind of a wash. Some studies found that online was better, some found that in person was better, and I think it really depends on the shopper and the habits and the product. So this is looking at the purchase of a toy in an urban area. And so the traditional shopper is someone who goes to the store and buys it, and maybe does some research driving around, looking at different stores first, doesn't necessarily combine their trips, where a cybernaut is someone who only researches online, shops online, returns online, is a pure online consumer. And then the cybernaut impatient is someone who wants that fast shipping, so that maybe the 2-day Amazon shipping or something like that. So you can see with the traditional shopper, the majority of the carbon footprint is customer transportation, so driving yourself to and from the store, with just the top portion, that green portion, being packaging. So to try to improve upon that, if you like traditional shopping better, would be to combine your trips, and try to do all of your errands at once. Try to buy as many things as you can, plan ahead, make a list so you don't have to do a bunch of trips within a week, and watch out for what I call the target effect of going in and you only needed 3 things, but you leave with a cart full of things, because Target's so good at capturing our eye with different products that we didn't intend to buy. If you're an online shopper, obviously you can see the huge piece here is packaging for a traditional online shopper. And so there's not a lot you can do about that unless you choose to buy from companies that are really mindful about their packaging, and make sure that you do recycle that or compost that if you can. And so that will shrink that carbon footprint a little bit. And then looking at the freight transportation is increased for someone who wants that quicker shipping. So choosing the slowest shipping, remembering that even if it's free through Amazon Prime, it's not really free, and it doesn't change the carbon footprint. It's still, in 2 days, it's having to be rushed to get there. And so it does have a higher carbon footprint. So choosing the slower shipping is always better. Also being aware, thinking about the social impact of the warehouse conditions of people that work in places like fulfillment centers for Amazon. I used to think that if I could combine all of my Amazon shopping into one box, I was, doing a service so that it was just one box and just one trip. And then I watched some newscast about how these poor Amazon workers are, walking all over Kingdom Come in these huge warehouses to put all of my random items in one box. And so it's not the best solution there. So to make better choices with shopping online, there are a few things you can do. There's browser extensions you can add if you use Chrome, like Done Good and EcoCart. I haven't personally used either of these. I discovered these in some of my research for this presentation, but Done Good is a website that kind of verifies all of these different products and companies, and you get a discount shopping through their website, or you can add their browser extension. And then EcoCart is interesting. It's an extension you add, and it will make your purchases carbon neutral. And I think that's because they've partnered with different brands. And so it's not for every purchase you make online, but I think they said over 200 brands, where I think it ends up that the brand pays for to neutralize your carbon emissions from that purchase. So I'm not sure if that's a good choice or not, but that looked like an interesting new thing that maybe might be available to us in the future. And then Etsy is a great website. If you haven't used that before, it's all handmade items. There's sellers that make a whole range of things that are handmade. I've bought quite a few things on Etsy over the years, and they as a business just offset all of the carbon emissions, and that's at no cost to the seller or the buyer. So you can often find eco-friendly items at Etsy, but then feel good that you're not having a carbon emission because Etsy has paid to offset those there. All right, so now we're going to get into the 3 topics that I'm going to kind of focus in on tonight. So the first one is groceries. And here's a picture from the farmer's market that we long for this kind of great produce in the middle of summer now that we're in the cold of winter. So some tips on trying to be a more responsible consumer when it comes to buying groceries. A spoiler is that for each of these categories, I'm going to suggest you buy less. And for food, that means to try to prevent waste. And so buying only what your family needs, being really mindful of what you already have in the pantry or in the fridge and not buying too much, not shopping at Costco if you're a small family that can't get through it in time. And then, using those products that you buy, putting them front and center in your fridge so that you can use them up before they go bad. Buying local is always better, of course, and in season when you can. That can be kind of difficult this time of year. And so when you are buying something that isn't local, but you want to buy some fresh food, trying to avoid stuff that traveled by air if you can. And that's easier said than done because it says nowhere on the label if it came by sea or by air, but actually a lot of our produce comes by sea, and the higher carbon footprint is involved in flying. And so you can kind of get a hint if something is really highly perishable and it came from a long way away. That combination means it probably traveled by air. Some common ones are berries, asparagus, green beans, and mangoes. So you don't have to worry about maybe avocados coming from Mexico. Those probably were shipped up on a boat. But if you're buying some things that are really highly perishable and it came from quite a ways away, then you can imagine it had a pretty high carbon footprint to get there. Memorizing the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15 if you can. I know that's a long list, but it stays pretty much the same every year. They tweak it every year. You'll see on the Dirty Dozen, there's quite a bit of tree fruit. So even buying locally, when you buy nectarines, apples, peaches, cherries, pears, you're still going to want to try to buy organic if you can, because those Dirty Dozen indicate produce that uses quite a bit of pesticides out of necessity for the type of food it is. And then Clean 15 are items that you don't necessarily have to worry about buying organic because they naturally just don't need as much pesticides. So it's nice because things like avocados are pretty expensive. So you can rest assured you don't necessarily need to buy organic avocados and increase the price that much. And then when you're shopping, of course, considering the packaging, if you have options, buying in bulk, that's a little bit difficult, of course, with COVID right now. Hopefully, as we recover from that, we'll be able to return to buying in bulk more often and really consider using reusable packaging as much as we can. The biggest thing you can do in buying groceries, and this will be bad news to some people probably, is eating plant-based. And I know a lot of you probably have started to do that. This is definitely a trend that's really taking off. More and more people are reducing the amount of meat and dairy that they eat. And that's really the best thing that you can do. If you had to choose between, should I eat local or should I eat less meat, then you really want to choose less meat. It matters more what you eat than where it came from in general. Of course, it is good to try to buy humanely raised, things that were pasture raised, not from a factory farm. That's definitely better from a sustainability standpoint and the ethics as far as the animal is concerned. And it will reduce the carbon footprint a little bit, but that only goes so far. Really eating less meat is your option, your best option. And mostly beef. In America, I know we don't eat a ton of lamb, but that's the worst contender there, as you see on the chart here. The green is what happens on the farm. So the emissions like the methane that the animal produces, the fertilizers and nitrogen are high when it comes to a carbon footprint, the farm equipment, all of that is happening on the farm, and that's the vast majority of where that carbon footprint comes from. Everything else, transportation, processing, retail, cooking, all of that is just the little orange bit at the top. So it's really mostly happening on the farm when you look at the carbon footprint. So you can see that reducing your beef and cheese is a good option, and lamb, pork, so pretty much red meat. Turkey and chicken has a smaller carbon footprint. So opting for that when you can is a good option, but you'll notice that cheese is pretty high up there. So if you decide to lay off the meat, but then up your protein by eating cheese, that might not work out well for you as far as carbon footprint is concerned. And then looking down the line, you'll start to see more plant-based foods, including high protein, things like peanut butter, nuts, tofu, beans that all still have a lot of protein. And even when you look at these charts and you look at it not by weight, this is by kilogram of consumed food, but even when you look at it by protein level in the food, it still evens out to be better to eat plant-based. And then what's interesting, I read on a different chart, was that this has a carbon footprint for nuts, but depending on the nut, some tree nuts actually have a negative carbon footprint. They're carbon negative because the tree absorbs so much carbon. So that's kind of a cool fact if you enjoy nuts. Nuts are pretty water intensive, so there's definitely the issue there of the water consumption, but I thought that was an interesting fact. And then it doesn't show it here, but also interesting to note that out of our total carbon footprint, food waste is about 6%, which is a pretty high level, I think, when you think about everything that you do for your carbon footprint, that food waste could be as high individually as 6% of greenhouse gas emissions. So that's definitely something we need to work on improving. So some local options for food. This is probably pretty self-explanatory. Obviously, buying at the farmer's market when you can. CSAs are community supported agriculture, and that's where you get a box of produce from a local farm. You can do it directly through a farm. I've done it through Rhubarb Market before. You can get it weekly or every other week, and it's really fun to get different things. You don't get to pick what you're getting, but you get a good assortment throughout the season. I think it's from like June to October is typical. They do have some winter CSAs, which I've done before. You get some interesting root vegetables you maybe haven't cooked with a lot before, but summer CSAs are so wonderful to be able to support local farmers and have a fresh amount of food coming in every week or every other week. And like I said, you can do that. There's some local farms that do it directly, or you can sign up through Rhubarb Market. If you haven't been to Rhubarb Market, I highly recommend it. We love it at Sustainable Wenatchee. Sandy there has a great assortment of all kinds of great local produce, lots of organic. It's about as local as you can get. Even this time of year, she does a great job of sourcing things from over on the west side to have greens year round, and she's got a great location now downtown. So highly recommend visiting Rhubarb Market. And then of course the natural food stores. We have a great one downtown in Wenatchee, and Leavenworth has Sage Mountain Natural Foods, and Bear Foods in Chelan are the three that kind of come to mind in North Central Washington area that have all really great selection. And then if you are trying to combine trips and you're at Fred Meyer, the natural food section in Fred Meyer is really impressive. They've got a lot of vegan and vegetarian options and natural options, so I definitely recommend that as well. And for each category, I'm offering some of my favorite things. You can take it or leave it, but these are some of the things that I enjoy. And all of these you can actually find at Fred Meyer, or I know several of them are at the natural food stores as well, and Rhubarb Market. This Chow cheese on the left is a vegan cheese made in Seattle by Field Roast, and I think it's pretty good. You can't replace cheese, of course, but I think it does a pretty good job. Cauli crumble is something I found at Fred Meyer, and it is made from lentils and cauliflower, and it's just really well seasoned, and I think works really well in tacos, or we add it to our spaghetti sauce. And especially if you make spaghetti with like a chickpea-based pasta or a lentil-based pasta, that's a really high protein meal when you add the cauli crumble and then a higher protein pasta rather than wheat. You can get lots of protein without having to worry about it at all. This sour cream in the middle is plant-based, which I know sounds weird, but it's at Fred Meyer, and I think it's pretty good if you're a sour cream lover and want to try something else. The soy rizo is soy chorizo. I first found that at a Trader Joe's, but you can find it locally in this brand at natural food stores, and I believe it's at Fred Meyer as well. And it's really good. We mix a half of a package with 2 cans of refried beans, and that is a really high protein thing to add to tacos or burritos. That's really good. And then Miyoko's is a great brand of dairy-free, dairy type items. She makes a great butter and has cheese, like shredded cheese and different kinds of products, and you can find those at Rhubarb Market, and I believe maybe at Fred Meyer as well. So those are some of my favorite things, if you're interested, that you can find locally that will reduce your carbon footprint. And then I've listed a few different research tools. So when you're out shopping, things to look for, you'll of course recognize USDA organic, and anything that's organic certified through the USDA is also GMO and hormone free. You always want to look for fair trade if you can, especially in coffee and chocolate. Those are two things where it's really important. But also if you can find bananas and tea or other items that it's good to try to look for fair trade certified. There's a couple different organizations that certified for fair trade. There's Fair Trade USA and Fair Trade International, and they're not all equal. Some are more stringent than others. If you're interested, you can kind of look into that more. But I think anything with a fair trade certification means that they're doing their part. If you're buying animal products, try to look for certified humane or animal welfare approved is even above certified humane. Looking at wine, and I think beer as well, is something called salmon certified. And I know that Hard Row to Hoe is a winery up in Manson, and they are salmon certified. So that's a good local organic wine if you're interested in an eco-friendly wine that's local. And then there's certified sustainable palm oil. And this one's tricky because palm oil is in so many products, food products and cosmetics. And it regularly doesn't say palm oil in the ingredients. It has some other sciencey name. So it's hard to kind of boycott palm oil, but it's really bad for deforestation in tropical areas and loss of habitat for wild animals. And so if you can try to find things that have certified sustainable palm oil, that's a great bonus. As I think I mentioned in the greenwashing portion, you can ignore different things that have no basis. So if it says pasture raised or free range or 100% natural, if there's no way to back those up. So those are just claims that they're making that aren't necessarily, that's not certified. So you can ignore those. And for more information, there's the Environmental Working Group. They have a great website with a database and a healthy living app that you can download and look up different products. And now we're on to close. So this was really fun for me to do the research. I just read a book called The Conscious Closet, and I found it really interesting. And I think I want to do a whole presentation on just fashion. And I'm not into fashion, but it's really interesting and fascinating what goes into making our clothes and what's being done about it and the progress that's being made. And so a lot of what I derive from here is from that book, and I highly recommend it. I'll list several books at the end of the presentation that I recommend and enjoy. But in the book, she mentions, it's written by Elizabeth Klein, and she mentions that there's different types of people when it comes to fashion. There's the minimalist, the traditionalist, and the style seeker. And so it kind of depends where you fall on that spectrum with what you're going to be interested in. I would kind of consider myself more of a minimalist. And so something like a capsule wardrobe is really appealing to me because I'm not trying to make a statement. I'm not interested in new trends. I just kind of want classic things. I'm kind of boring. And so if that's you, then a capsule wardrobe could be a really great idea. So it's the idea that you have just a lot of basic pieces that are really easy to mix and match. And they don't have to be boring. They can be bright colors or fun things. But the idea is that they all go together really well. They're high quality, that will last and last from season to season. And you can kind of mix and match. And I like that you just don't have to worry about it. You know, you have all these things that go together and you're ready to go. So if that interests you, then you can research capsule wardrobes. That's a really popular topic right now. If you get on Pinterest or something, you'll find lots of ideas for each of the seasons of the year. Shopping resale is a great way to be sustainable. I think that once something has been purchased and you're going to be buying it secondhand, it's kind of cleansed of any environmental sins or, you know, social sins, because now you're giving it new life. So you can buy anything. It doesn't have to be, you know, organic or sustainable or responsible. If you're buying it secondhand, you're doing a good deed. And so that's kind of a nice way to look at it if you want. And it also makes things much more reasonably priced if you're looking at buying something really high quality, that you can afford something maybe like Patagonia that's pretty high priced, but you know that it is sustainable and responsibly made and fair trade certified. So besides going to thrift stores, which is not really something I'm into, I know some people love doing that, there's some great new apps and websites that you can use to buy used online. One that I use regularly is called Mercari. Poshmark is another one that's been around for a long time. Of course, eBay, if you're looking for different items, that's kind of the grandfather of all these buying and trading, selling websites. And even brands are doing it themselves, where Patagonia has their worn wear project, where people can turn in pristine, really nice, great condition clothes, and then Patagonia will check them all out and then resell them. Eileen Fisher does the same thing with her Renew program. So you can buy something, get a good deal, but no, it's had a life once already and been worn, but now it's getting another life through those companies. And then of course, if you want to do more in person, there's always Facebook, where there's buy, sell, trade groups where you can do, local buying and selling of items and clothes. Renting is something that's kind of taking off. I haven't done this a lot, but in reading this book, it seems to be a popular thing, especially for those style seekers who want maybe it's a dress to wear to a wedding or a fancy event where you don't want to buy a several $100 dress, but you want to look really good and impress, and so you can rent a dress. I looked into it several years ago. I don't know if it's changed, but with Rent the Runway was one that you could rent a dress, and you got 2 sizes to make sure, each size in either side of your regular size to make sure it fit, and you got to keep it for 3 or 4 days and then send it back. And so that's an eco-friendly way to have something that's new to you for just a little while. And then there's companies like Le Tote that are renting regular clothes, and you wear it for as long as you want and send it back. And they clean it and dry clean whatever they need to do to get it in pristine condition and send it off again, and kind of just keep that process going. And that's for everyday clothes or work attire. And you also have the option to purchase it. If you really love something, you can buy it at a discount from them. So that's an option if you're into fashion and want some new items, but don't want to have to sell them yourself when you're done with them. As far as buying smarter, when you are ready to buy something, especially if it's new, you need to consider what it's made out of. So the vast portion of carbon footprint of a piece of clothing is not from transportation, but it's from the textile that it was made from and making of the garment. It's like 75% of the carbon footprint. So it's not so much about transporting it here or there, or the packaging. It's the garment itself and how it was made with what fabric. So it's really important to consider what fabric it was made out of. So you need to think about natural versus synthetic. Synthetics have come a long way. A lot of people think about polyester. You think of like 70s polyester, but when you look in your closet, there's a lot of polyester there. And so trying to opt for recycled polyester if you can, and considering the pros and cons of natural versus synthetic. Synthetics are good for obviously active wear and outdoor gear, but you might want a more natural fabric like cotton if it's something that you're going to wear against your skin because it breathes better and doesn't trap odors and that kind of thing. Wool is a great option if you're interested in a more natural product that can biodegrade and not last forever like a synthetic polyester will. One thing I learned and reading about the kind of natural versus synthetic debate was rayon or viscose. In the US, it's called rayon more often. In the UK, it's viscose. Can be made of quite a few things. It can be made of, beech trees, bamboo, or eucalyptus. And so you have to kind of look into the process and what it was made out of to know if it's eco-friendly or not. Sometimes something will be advertised as eco-friendly bamboo, but actually the process to turn it into rayon is not an environmentally friendly process at all. So in general, the advice I found was to look for something called lyocell, or the brand name is Tencel. It's made by Lenzing. And so that's the best rayon that you can find. You also might find something that says modal or bamboo, and those could be eco-friendly, but it really depends on the process. So you need to kind of do a little bit more research to know for sure. Those are natural fibers. They're made from trees or plants, but the process to get them into a fiber can be really energy and chemically intensive. And then another great way to buy smarter is to buy really high quality and then mend and repair as needed, to try to keep something for as long as you can and really get as much life out of it as you can. And if you do plan on using apps like Mercari or trying to resell things after you've used it, buying higher quality will go a lot longer, because you can't buy things that will fall apart from, fast fashion brand and then plan on getting any resale value out of that. If you're interested in this, I highly recommend, as I said, The Conscious Closet by Elizabeth Klein and checking out her website. I think it's elizabethkleinbooks.com, and she has a conscious shopping directory there that lists a lot of great brands and ideas on how to shop consciously when it comes to your closet. For local options for clothes, there are, of course, lots of local thrift shops. I am not the best person to give advice on that as far as which have the best selection. There's, of course, big chains like Goodwill, but smaller ones. There's one that supports veterans and the YWCA. And so if you're interested in thrifting and kind of like the hunt there's, of course, lots of options there. There are a few new consignment shops that have popped up in the last year or so here. One is called Little Pockets in Cashmere, and it has mostly kids' clothes, but some women's clothes as well. And so it's great to see some options there if you are interested in buying used. I love buying used for my kids because they don't know the difference and they wear through things, you know, so quickly. There's also a new consignment shop in Leavenworth called Cool Check Consignment, and that is focused on outdoor gear. So not just clothes, but like skis and outdoor equipment and things too. And that just launched, I think, within the last month or so. So those are great to consider if you're looking for those items. Two local events that I really love are Women's Service League of Wenatchee's My Girlfriend's Closet event and Prom Dress Giveaway. Those are both traditionally held in March. I don't know if they're going to be trying to do it this year. They had to cancel last year, of course, because of COVID, but it's traditionally held in about mid-March, with My Girlfriend's Closet being the one week, and then Prom Dress Giveaway the week after. And My Girlfriend's Closet is great because they sort it out so well. You can find designer items. They have it all. It's kind of like shopping in a real store. In the past, they've had it in the old Hastings building. And so it's kind of a traditional experience of going shopping, but it's all donated clothing, and they have it really well sorted out for what you're looking for. If you want the higher end things or any kind of specific item you're looking for, it's easy to find, as opposed to kind of a thrift shop that can be a little bit overwhelming, I think. And that's all donated clothes, and all of that goes to, all of the money raised goes to their mission of supporting homelessness in Wenatchee, which is great. They also do Prom Dress Giveaway, which is a great event if you're, you know, a young woman looking for a formal dress. It doesn't have to be for prom. It can be for any formal dress event that she needs, and those are for free. So these give these dresses another life after they've been worn for just one night, for just a few hours. It's a great event. Some small businesses that carry eco-friendly clothes are Arlberg Performance Footwear and American Shoe Shop. One that I recently learned of, I think you say it, Wahai Yoga. It's a storefront in Leavenworth, and it's also online, and it's yoga apparel that's made, it's Blue Sign certified, really eco-friendly. And it's just really cool that there's a local yoga shop where you can get your apparel. So definitely check that out if you're into yoga. So my favorite things, as I mentioned, I'm kind of a minimalist, so I don't have a lot of favorite brands to recommend, but I do really like shopping on Mercari, and can answer any questions about that. I find it really easy. You can set filters to look just exactly for what you're looking for, and it will set even an alert. So if you're looking for a really specific item, it will send you a message if that item has been posted by someone. I've sold a lot on it too, sold a lot of my kids' old clothes and things like that, so I found that really easy to use. I love Patagonia, and I've purchased quite a bit of that used on Mercari because, of course, it's a lot more affordable. And I'm a big fan of wool, and one wool brand I found recently, it's a cashmere brand from made with Mongolian cashmere, is Nadam. It's N-A-D-A-A-M, and it's sustainable, responsibly made cashmere, and it's pretty pricey, but they have a crew neck cashmere sweater that's just standard $75, which is pretty reasonable, especially when you think about it being fair trade and environmentally responsible. A lot of their other things are quite expensive, but they do have sales pretty regularly. So if you're a wool fan, that's a really great choice that I have enjoyed. Some research tools for clothes, so you know what to look for. The GOTS Organic label is kind of the gold standard for not just environmental standards, but also that has some of the fair trade worked in there as well, with being socially responsible. OECO-Tex has several different labels. Standard 100 is probably the one you've seen before, and that is essentially saying that it's a safe, there's no harmful chemicals used in the textile. They also have a few different ones, Made in Green and Step, and I think both of those also have a social component as well, so you know that there's some fair trade certification going on there as well. And then Blue Sign, I mentioned that the yoga company, Wahai, they're Blue Sign certified, and that is looking at the pollution and the chemicals that are made or that go into the making of those textiles. Apps and websites to look for are Good On You. That Good On You rates different companies, so you can kind of understand where they fall. They've got a ranking system as far as both sustainable, for environmentally and socially sustainable, and Done Good is a website I mentioned before, I think, that has some good options there. And moving on to household items. So this is kind of the catch-all category, so I won't get super specific, but it's talking about, you know, thinking about cleaning supplies, toilet paper, cosmetics, household goods like bedding and towels, kids' toys, office supplies, kind of all the everyday stuff that you find yourself buying when you're at the store, apart from clothes and food. So again, trying to buy less, trying to evaluate whether you really need it or not. This kind of overlaps quite a bit, this section, with some things I say when I do a zero waste talk, which is often kind of going back to the olden days and thinking about how our grandmothers used to do without all of these disposable options, looking more for reusable, sturdy, you know, heirloom quality things that will last rather than all of the disposable options that are out there. Getting creative if you're a crafty person, repurposing items, and noticing the packaging items if you have an option there, choosing the more sustainable packaging. And then opting, when you're talking about like cleaning supplies, opting for things that are more concentrated over diluted products. One of the things I really like are these Drops laundry pods that come in a totally recyclable cardboard container, so you don't have to get the big, you know, jug of laundry detergent that's not, you can't recycle it because it's not going to be sorted out in the facility. And so having something come in cardboard is definitely preferred, and it's not diluted. You're not paying for a liquid product that's quite a bit of water. Some options for household items include looking to borrow from neighbors or use your Facebook Buy Nothing page if you're a part of that. All areas have a Buy Nothing page just for their your local area. So within Wenatchee, even there's different areas that you can join so that you can ask your neighbors if you can borrow something or get something for nothing. I think of like tools, if you have, you know, rather than buying a power tools, like the example is a drill, a power drill. They say, I think it's like 18 minutes or something that it gets used in its life. Borrowing something like that from a neighbor rather than buying your own. I love the idea of tool libraries and hope that someday maybe Wenatchee would get one. I know Met How Recycles has one up in Twist where you can borrow things like power tools rather than everyone having their own. Of course, looking at local thrift shops and consignment stores. Stores like Simply Unique downtown is a great place where you can find refurbished furniture. We bought a really nice antique dresser there and painted it for our daughter, and it's just really high quality, you know, like furniture used to be, not like it's made now. Looking at natural food stores for different products for cleaners and household supplies, and places like Rhubarb Market have a few things there. Of course, looking at your local vendors, whether that's at Pybus, at downtown shops, the farmers market, or looking at their online stores. Some local vendors don't have a storefront, but have the ability to purchase things online. If you haven't been to Jubilee Global Gifts in Leavenworth, that's a great place to shop for household items and gifts, and it's all fair trade there, and it supports a local nonprofit, Upper Valley Mend, so that's a really fun store. And then there's more and more mainstream brands that are having a natural line, or you can find a natural brand in a mainstream store. So thinking like Safeway and Fred Meyer both have natural lines, or you can find 7th generation products pretty much anywhere now. So those are good things to opt for if you're looking for home products. Some of my favorite things on the left there, that's my favorite shampoo bar. You can find locally made shampoo bars at like Salt Creek Apothecary downtown, or in the Bubblery up in Leavenworth. But this one's my favorite shampoo bar. It's great because you don't have to throw away or recycle a shampoo bottle later. Then next is these facial rounds are made by Marley's Monsters, and that's one of my favorite zero waste brands. It's kind of local. It's from Eugene, Oregon, and she makes a lot of great zero waste products like unpaper towels to replace your paper towels with cloth ones, paper napkins or cloth napkins, cloth wipes, all sorts of different zero waste things to replace your disposable paper products. Stasher bags are the silicone sandwich bag you see there. We have a lot of those and use them every day. They're great for storing food and different items for kids and all sorts of things. I love sparkling water, so we have a soda stream with the glass carafe there so that we can make our own sparkling water at home without having to buy LaCroix, which we still do sometimes, but this helps put a dent in that. This leaf razor is something I bought about a year ago and have been pretty happy with in using a zero waste razor. So you can recycle the blades there. You save them up and then you can recycle them in a metal recycler. So that's a zero waste option compared to the plastic cartridges that we're also used to. And then BioClean is a company that makes natural cleaning products that I really like. They're concentrated and they always come in 1 or 2 plastics, so they're easy to recycle, and they're just really eco-friendly and a great American-made company, and you can find that at places like Fred Meyer or natural food stores. Okay, research tools for household items. So again, there's a whole long list of certifications you can look for. Something that's B Corp certified is always a really good sign. That's a really high quality certification. Fair trade when you can find it. Cradle to cradle, again, all of the different certifications for fabrics and textiles. If you're buying something that is wood or paper, looking for Forest Stewardship Council certified, FSC. The Environmental Working Group has their own verification system, and you can find that on their website. And then Cruelty Free International, to know that it wasn't tested on animals, is always a good thing. And then 1% for the Planet is actually not a certification, but just a indicator that that company donates 1% of their profits to nonprofits in a sustainability related topic. So it's not that that's a certified product by any means, but that they care about it and they're giving some of their profit back. Some apps and websites to look at would be Environmental Working Group's Healthy Living app, and their Skin Deep database if you're interested in looking at cosmetics and skincare, and then again the Done Good website. And so I mentioned at the beginning that changing the way we purchase things as a consumer is a great place to start, but it's not a good place to stop. It's not all that we can do. And so that leads us to extended producer responsibility, which is kind of the fancy way of saying the lesson from kindergarten: you made this mess, you clean it up. So it's making responsible the manufacturers for not only their packaging, but the end of the life of the product. So asking them to design packaging that truly can be recycled in our area, not putting a number 7 plastic that's not accepted anywhere, and asking them to fund that, the recycling of that packaging, and also the end of the life management of a product. So when your product is no longer good, it's not up to the consumer to figure out what to do with it, but the producer of that product takes it back and deals with it. So that's kind of the future. And there are some bills that have been looked at in Washington, Oregon, and I think California, as we're often, the leaders in some of these environmental topics. But I think that's something that we can all be advocates for, asking the manufacturers of all this stuff to take some responsibility. Annie Leonard, who does Story of Stuff and Story of Change, she said, the solutions we really need are not for sale at the supermarket. We can't buy our way out of the waste and the issues of overusing resources. We really have to look at the whole life cycle of something. So now, these are a few of the books that I have read or used to kind of research this presentation, and recommend them. If you're more of a documentary type of a person and don't want to take the time to read these books, instead of Fashionopolis, Overdressed, or The Conscious Closet, all of which address the fast fashion industry's effect on the environment and the social implications, you could watch the True Cost movie. We screened that movie about a year ago with the museum, and it's not any longer on Netflix, but you can rent it on their website for $6. So that's called The True Cost, and it's really impactful. I highly recommend it if you haven't seen it. If you're interested in kind of reducing your carbon footprint through your diet, eating animals, Kiss the Ground, Diet for Hot Planet are all good ones. And the movie Cowspiracy is a good one. With any documentaries, I think more so than books, you have to take it with a grain of salt because documentaries are, of course, so biased. But I think that there's a lot of truth within Cowspiracy, even if some of it's a little bit exaggerated. And then there's a new movie, new documentary on Netflix called Kiss the Ground, based off of this book. And that's narrated by Woody Harrelson, and it's a really good one about regenerative agriculture, and I highly recommend that as well. So with that, I will wrap it up, and we will open it up for some questions.
Awesome. Thank you, Jana, so much. This has been really informative. It looks like we've gotten a couple questions through the Q&A box. So if you have additional questions, please feel free to post in there. The first one is, do you know, could you talk about any stores in Wenatchee that sell in bulk? This person just moved here and hasn't been to many stores yet.
Yeah. You know, I haven't been to a lot of stores lately. And I think that some bulk places have been closed where they've kind of closed it off during COVID. But for the long term, I know that Fred Meyer right by the natural food section has a decent bulk area. I know Wenatchee Natural Foods has a really good, in the very back, they have a lot of bulk products with a really good selection there. So I would recommend that one. And then Winco isn't open yet, but in past Wincos I've been to, they've had a really good bulk section. So I'm hoping that they will as well. But yeah, natural food stores and Fred Meyer, the two that kind of come to mind.
Awesome. The next question is, with clothes that are rented, what's the impact from the clothing that's dry cleaned so often and the increasing need for that service?
That's a really good question. In the book, if I remember right, when it was talking about these rental services, they do consider that, and I think use, I'm trying to think of the one where she interviewed him, and they do use a green dry cleaning process where they're careful with what chemicals they use. Again, you know, the vast majority of a garment's carbon footprint comes from making the garment, not from the cleaning of it or the transportation or anything like that. And so I think if it keeps you from buying something new, it's still worth it, but definitely it's something to consider because there are a lot of costs with traditional dry cleaning that it's not an eco-friendly process at all. It's a good point.
Yeah. And then we had another question come through from Margaret that we might have to do some research on, Margaret. She's asking about the northern half of the NCW library service area. We know we have folks tuning in from all over our 5 counties this evening, and she's just wanting to know about any good recyclers, thrift stores, food stores, etc., north of Wenatchee, you know, up in Ferry County or in Okanagan. So Margaret, we'll do some research on that and try to provide some information about those places. But if anybody is familiar with any of those places, please put them in the Q&A or the chat, and we can gather that information.
Yeah, I know Met House Recycles and TWISP is a great nonprofit that does a lot of recycling there. They have a lot of cool programs and do great work. I'd say that, you know, most, even smaller communities, I'm surprised most places have a natural food store. But yeah, I can't speak to specifics of up north.
Yeah, that's great. And then someone else asked if it was possible to send us the slides or a short list of the information we have in the slides. And I wanted to share that the recording of this program will be on our Facebook page, and we can link that to our website as well, so that you can find all the slides there. And then we have a note from Claudia saying, it's not a question, but the company Ibex sells wool clothing. It's an online store that sends out their materials with sustainable packaging. So she just wanted to share that. So that's a great tip. Yeah. So I think that'll wrap us up for this evening. Jana, thank you so much for joining us today, and we look forward to partnering again in the future to continue learning about these things.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I did want to say we've got a program coming up next. It starts next Tuesday. It's a discussion group And so we're meeting virtually every other Tuesday for it's 6 sessions, so it'll be for 12 weeks. And you purchase this book. It's called A Different Way, and the topic is about living more sustainably, more simply, kind of a minimalism topic. And so I think it should be really interesting. This is the second time we've done a discussion group like this. So you purchase the book for $15, and then we meet every other Tuesday virtually via Zoom. So you can learn more about that on our website if you're interested.
Great. And that's sustainablewenatchee.org, is that right?
Yes.